All right, so with us today is Jason Clarke, and he is a celebrated author, adventurer, gold medal Olympian, and popular TV chef. He's actually none of these things. He is, however, one of the most sought after creative minds in Australia, and he thinks of himself as a plumber of the mind, which we're going to ask about later. The guy you go to when your head gets clogged, and as founder of Minds at Work, he's helped people think again. Since the end of the last century, working with clients around the world in virtually every industry and government sector on issues ranging from creativity and troubleshooting to culture change and leadership. His mission? To help people think. His vision? A future that works. He doesn't know what he'll be doing in 2030, but he's open to suggestions. So, welcome, Jason. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's lovely to be here. I sound awesome. I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say.
Oh, that's awesome. So listen, we've had a couple of conversations and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. So I'm just delighted to be able to share them with other people. And I guess my first question for me is tell everybody about your background and how you got started in change management. I know you were a stage manager and you got that break really early in life. So how did that work out?
It's funny, the word career has two meanings. Career, the noun, means a sort of a history of achievement, but career, the verb, means to ricochet wildly from side to side. And I feel like, I've not had a career, but I've been careering. I've just been bouncing around. When I was, 17, I got the lowest year 12 score in the history of my school. Not just that year. No one had ever done as badly. And well, no, it's true. And the advice I got from a careers advisor was she said, I don't think you have anything to offer the world. So that was a great start for me to get going. And because I didn't mind talking and I was comfortable in front of groups of people, I thought maybe I could be an actor. I mean, how hard could that be? But it turns out you have to have talent, which I didn't have either. And having, applied to so many different theatre companies, what the directors would say is, listen, we don't really need any more actors. And we certainly don't need you to be an actor. What we're really looking for are stage managers. And at that stage, I was desperate for work. And I said, well, what do they do? And the director pointed to the stage and said, well, that's the stage. Do you think you could manage that? And, at first level, it looked pretty simple. Actors come on, actors go off, the curtain goes up, the curtain goes down. How hard could it be? That part of it turned out to be very simple. All you need is a checklist. But the bit that I didn't realize was the job was really about ego management. It was about how do you deal with people who are very different mindsets, very different thinking styles, different personality styles, different ways of working, and a lot of them really coming into conflict and opposition a lot. Right. And I realized that part of my job was to be kind of what now we'd call a facilitator. Mm-hmm. But I was trying to learn to do that at 17. How do I get all these grown-ups to play nice so that we could actually put on this ballet or this opera? And because you'd have like front stage people who were, I used to think of them as sprinters. They would take a day's worth of energy and burn it up in 1 2-hour show and then be exhausted by the end of it. But they really were, because they had not paced themselves. You've got to see James Brown burn up a day's worth of energy in 20 minutes. That's the act. Yes. I think how can anyone work at that level? He can't for very long.
Right.
But the backstage people were marathoners. They were people who very low energy because they had to go all day and all night and, take the show to the next town and all the rest of it. And so just trying to manage these different ways of thinking. And also, we've got a change ahead of us. We're trying to put this show on the road. We're trying to turn an idea into a set and into costumes and into a show. And it means you had to move from a creative kind of conversations to more kind of design conversations. Then we had to be more practical, and then we had to be really hardcore pragmatic. And I was fascinated by that shift in the thinking. And so that really is the core of who I am. And that's gotten me into things like, film production, and then sort of, management consulting. And in the last 20 years, it's been innovation and change. Right. And more recently, it's been for people who don't drive change, but they feel like change is happening to them. So I really didn't know what change management was. And to some extent, I'm not sure I still know what it is. But So I'm making this up as I go along. But I guess the summary is, having come from a culture where people felt like they were making change happen, now I deal with clients who feel like change is happening to them.
To them, yes. Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get them on the other side of the equation. How do you lead it as opposed to react to it?
Well, and the thing that I find really fascinating about the way that you came into it, because I came at it from the back end, from a project management perspective. So it was all about getting people through whatever changes, somebody else instigated, right? And so you got the lucky view of seeing it from the very, very beginning in the creative process, and also being able to understand that management of the ebb and flow. I think that is phenomenal. What a great experience you had. That's just...
Yeah, I've been an incredibly lucky individual. I mean, I can't point to anything I've done and take credit for. I've just fallen into the right places at the right time, I think. And I guess the other thing is that the innovation thing, when I was a kid, we just called it, creativity or inventiveness or ingenuity. And so when it became innovation, it was still basically project management, but it had this overlay of idea management. So if you think about in a project, we have to allocate time and money to an outcome. So a project has a length. Like, think about your Gantt chart. It has a length.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ideas have width.
They do.
So when do we need to think big and when do we need to think small? And so if you think about a project, breathing and then squeezing and then breathing again.
Exactly. It's funny. I was thinking about that just after our conversation last night too, because one of these is very convergent. When you're dealing with project management and the triple constraints, you're trying to converge on something solid that you can deliver on. Where in a creative space, you're actually in a divergent arena where you're trying to think bigger and broader. So it's really fascinating, because long ago when I was working on training development, we would have iterative cycles of this training. We'd lock it down and then people would go away and deliver it, and they come back and realize that everybody had tweaked it a little bit and for good reasons. What was amazing is when we purposely brought that back to convergence, what we found is that everybody's little piece that they diverged on added more to it. And so when we brought it back together, it just got better and better. And so when we purposely started to introduce that convergence and divergence, it really, like your flow between the front of house and back of house, it really worked well to iterate things. Not unlike Agile, I suppose, right?
Yeah, but also I think when people see that, and when you show them, do you know what? Now we're breathing.
Right.
Like, now we're just looking for possibilities, and now we're past that. Now we're squeezing, we're bringing it back down to earth. And one of my students years ago, when I used to teach this sort of stuff, she would talk about having a searchlight mind versus a laser mind.
Yes.
And so in searchlight mind, you're open and you're sweeping and you're looking for everything. Okay, have we tried this? Have we thought of this? So if you look at, say, where SpaceX is at the moment, they're looking at a very, very controlled and conventional technology, and they're going, well, hang on, we'll back up. What are things we haven't tried before? What hasn't been thought of before? Is there anything interesting that we were too busy to see? Yeah. And then once you've found that thing, you move into laser mind, where you're now going to say, we're going to work in one direction to make this happen. And then once it's done, we're going to open up the searchlight again and to see, okay, what else is out there? And so it's that shifting of focal length. But what I think happens in most organizations, we train people to think like lasers. And so we look at one thing intensely and we miss some really interesting things either side of the beam.
Well, we do. And, not to completely get off track from the questions we talked about, but I want to go back to something you talked about in our first conversation, because it really fits well here. And it was a cycle of next, which is the new thing, and then better or best. And then I think the last one was about money most, right? Yeah. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah. Oh, try and stop me. And what I find fascinating about that, when you look at the history of any company, so when I go into an organization and they say, oh, we're trying to innovate and we're not very innovative, we're not very conservative, the first thing I do is I read their early history. And in their early history, they were incredibly inventive. In fact, that's what built the business in the first place. Yeah. And if you think about it, if I was to summarize, what was the key word that shaped the mindset of that early history was next. What is the next thing? what will be the next big idea? I mean, the innovator really only asks one question. What will people need next? Not what makes us the most money or what is the best or what have we always done? What do people need next? That's the key question, right? And so in the history of that company, I've looked at hundreds of them. Next builds the business. But the thing with innovation is nothing works the first time. So the reason why WD-40 is called WD-40 is it took Norm Larsen 40 attempts to make the formula work. It's water dispersant number 40. Well, that's really Wile E. Coyote thinking, where you can see this guy going, okay, that didn't work, but that didn't work, but that didn't work. So ideas are never perfect. New ideas are never perfect. Nothing ever works the first time. Nothing ever has. And so once you've kind of got the next going, the focus for the organization then becomes, how do we make it the best? How do we improve the quality and the reliability? If we're going to have autonomous cars, let's not have them explode or run over people. Okay, good. Let's fix the bugs.
Minor details.
And then that's right. But then the organization becomes fixated on best. And so it's about the quality, right? We want to have best possible outcomes, best products, best services, best workplace culture, all the rest of it. And in that polishing, that perfecting of the old idea, we stop looking for the next idea, because now we're just trying to perfect what we have. And you and I both work with companies that was kind of their downfall, that they didn't look for what was next because they were too busy perfecting what they had. Exactly. And then when companies get big, they become obsessed by most. How do we improve performance? How do we get better shareholder value? How do we cut our costs? How do we boost our profits? And so you're really trying to now squeeze the most you can get out of the last idea that you polished.
Yeah.
And that's where I think most organizations die, because they're so focused on making money and getting profit. Not only do they compromise the next, who's got time to think about that when we're doing so well? It ain't broke, don't fix it sort of thing. Yeah. But also they compromise the best.
Yeah.
Maybe I put fewer bolts in the next aeroplane that I'm making. Maybe I can water down the beer a little bit. You can start to see them compromising the quality. And that's why you have, my car has an airbag in it that will actually kill me. It won't save me. It will kill me. And the manufacturer's saying, please bring it back to the shop. We made some pretty bad corner cuts in the design of this thing. Yeah. And I think a vibrant organization does those things as a cycle. Let's find what's next. Let's make it the best. Let's get the most out of it. Now let's find what's next. And when you look at companies that do well and thrive, they keep that circle going. They don't stop when they get to most.
Right. And so one of the things we talked about yesterday that sort of ties into this, and the point I want to pull out is the breakdown of how many people sit in that innovative group versus the folks that sit in the management areas and all of that. And I think you had an acronym for it, right? It was IDEA?
Yeah. This what I call the IDEA model. This is the best thought I think I've ever had. That's how powerful this has been for me. I mean, I've made a whole career of this one basic idea, which is pretty basic, right? And everybody, by the way, everyone goes, of course that's how it works. I've just never heard it expressed like this. But I use this acronym of IDEA. So imagine, develop, evaluate, act. They're really the 4 basic steps. So I've got to begin by imagining, right? So think about your organizations. Do you have people in it who are imaginative? Who, if you gave them the chance to think big, they would do it. And you wouldn't have to train them and you wouldn't need a consultant. They wouldn't need extra bonuses. They would just want time and space and freedom to think. So that imagination phase is the beginning of the process. Now, I've worked with clients where that's all they do. All they do is imagine. Yeah. But guess what? Nothing comes of it. So nothing's ever moved beyond a drawing on the back of a napkin.
Right.
It's always been butcher's paper on the wall and group hugs and puppy dogs and rainbows, but they never turn it into anything.
Right.
Because the next phase, develop, D, is really about how do I put some constraints around this? What are some parameters? What's some criteria? How can I pick a good idea from perhaps a not quite so good idea? Yeah. This is what drove Da Vinci crazy. Da Vinci was not able to pick, I'm going to park the submarine, I'm going to work on the helicopter. He couldn't prioritize. So development is about how do you take all of the ingredients, because ideas are just ingredients. They're just loose little Lego bricks. How do I now pull them together to make something which is better than the sum of the whole? And
Right.
that's a designing mindset,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's got to be what I call a technical creative. They have to be open to ideas, but also have to be practical to figure out what to deliver. And then in the E phase, which is evaluation, this is really where you start to bring in people who are skeptical, even cynical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want people who worry about the politics, who worry about the money and the legality and the insurance and all that kind of
Kind of
stuff.
important.
And yeah, and organizations are filled with those people.
Yes.
It's usually the top 2/3 of the org chart. That's that mindset. And then ultimately, none of this makes any sense until you get to A, when you act.
Right.
And that's when you have people who say, look, just tell me what we're doing. Give me the key performance indicators. Give me a deadline. Give me a budget. Get out of my way. Let me do this. Yeah. And then once you've finished A, you go back to I. Okay, let's imagine what's the next thing.
Right.
And what I've found in organizations is that businesses have all of those minds,
Mm-hmm.
but the hardest ones to find will be the designers, the developers. So you'll have a handful of people who are imaginative. Everyone can find them. The place is full of evaluators and actors.
Right.
And if there's anyone who can think like a designer, they'll be hard to find, because it's actually the most challenging of the 4 mindsets.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to believe and doubt at the same time.
Yeah.
That's rare, you know. And that's why those organizations have a lot of consultants in them, because they're saying, you take our ideas, turn them into something that we can say yes or no to, and then we'll make them happen.
Yeah. No, what was also interesting about that is that you had talked the other day about how the breakdown and how the people who are imaginative and even potentially some of the designers were more marginalized. So, and I'm going to tie a couple of things together here. In 2008, your TED Talk, right? Because that's how I found you, so I have to bring it up. You talked about changing a culture. And when I asked you about that before, you had an interesting answer, and I think they tie together in how you sort of protect those people who are really a lot of change agents, right?
Yeah. Actually, it's very interesting. That's a beautiful segue the way you've done that. I think in terms of when you look at an organizational culture, I don't see one. I look for at least 4 cultures.
Right.
I'll say, so is there a culture of creativity and imagination? Is there a culture of design and engineering? Is there a culture of risk management? Is there a culture of action and performance?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'll try to see, have they got the 4 kind of ingredients, and do they all play nicely together? Because typically they don't.
Right.
Now, sometimes you'll go into an organization where it's missing a whole section. So if I work for a bank, if I do work with banks, I tend to find they don't hire people for their imagination. So everything is about risk management and performance. But if you work for, say, a graphic design studio, I'm going to find it harder to get a good cynic, because they probably don't hire people who are worried about those things. So it's about trying to figure out where's the native talent within the organization, and can it be sequenced differently? So you have to remove the authority, like who's more important than who. At this stage, it doesn't matter. But when do I want a creative discussion, and when do I need a practical discussion? And a huge part of my job has actually been quarantining. So if you and I are going to brainstorm ideas, we should be asking why not and what if. If someone says how much and who and when and how, we're having the wrong conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what I do is to say, can we hold off, that conversation about the risk and the cost? Can we just pause that? That's on. We're going to have that conversation on Thursday. That's a Thursday conversation. Today on Monday, we're talking about the 500-year plan. And it's really just to stop them shutting each other down.
Yes, because that's exactly what happens, right? They shut each other down. It's just like a wave, in that they can cancel each other out if they're not synced properly, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that was the beautiful thing that I noticed when I used to tour with orchestras, because I hated the sound of the orchestra tuning up. Like everyone's playing their instrument at the same time, and they're playing different parts of the opera. And it was just like nails on a blackboard. I used to hate it. But when the conductor would come in and say, right, everybody stop. Let's hear this bit first. Let's hear more of this. Okay, now I want to add something else. Great. Can I now have less of this and more of this? And so what the conductor does is they orchestrate.
Yes.
I take all of these different voices and all of these different points of view. And so when I work with people, I think of myself as a conductor.
Yeah.
And I'll say to myself, I love the idealism, but now I need a bit more practical thinking. Great. Can we now have less idealism? Can we have some cynicism, please? Oh, the cynicism is magical. Yes. And it's learning to respect and love
Yes.
each one of these mindsets, but also value them in a way that says your time is first and your time is third.
Yes.
Don't try and all do it at once. I'll tell you when I need you to do your thing.
Yeah.
And then people feel actually valued, and then they don't have to fight for attention.
I find it absolutely remarkable that you were able to pull so much out of being a stage manager, especially at such a young age. I mean, that whole analogy of being the conductor and being able to shift that direction and give everybody their own time and space is really important. It's really
I'm getting away with murder. You know, I'm waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, okay, I think you've had enough of that. Now go get a real job.
Well, you know, it is really amazing when you can kind of get into that flow and help other people get there too. Because when you don't have that sort of back and forth, it's waves just hitting rocks, right? It's just crashing.
That's
it's
right.
not really
That's
working. Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So one of the other questions I had for you is, when you're in the middle of trying to get through a change process, what are some of the reasons that people resist change?
Oh, great one. Great one. Actually, I love that question, because the first thing I would say, it's not because people hate change, because that's not true. Right. Yeah, but we say it all the time. People hate change. People hate change. Well, hang on. Do people protest? Do they travel? Do they renovate their houses? Are they interested in fashion? Do they want the latest technology? Do they have affairs? Hang on, wait a second. Are you sure people don't like change? People don't like being changed. That's the big thing. And so what I've realized is, if you say to someone, there's change coming, I can't explain it to you right now, but this is what you're going to have to do, and here's the new rules, and here's your new boss, people just go, hang on, wait a second, what's this about? No one's, whoa, what is this, right? Yeah. Whereas if you say to someone, look, we have to change, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to go, because we're making a lot of this up to begin with, and actually how we do this, I'm really going to need you to tell me. I'm going to need you to help me. That's the difference between trying to impose ownership of change, and what you're doing is you're offering authorship of change.
Exactly.
You're saying, come on board and do it with me, right? Yes. And my favorite example of that is, you know, when I was one, your president said the weirdest thing that any of them have said until, well, you know, recently. He gets up in front of 500 engineers and he says, I think we should go to the moon. Yeah. I want to be there by 1970. Yes. That's as far as I've thought this thing out. I'm off for drinks with Marilyn. Good luck, everyone. Right? And it empowered a whole generation of creative technical people to go, okay, with man, moon, 1970. Oh my God, how are we going to do that? Get a bit of paper. Let's work it out.
Yeah.
You know, and so you were giving people a challenge that wasn't a threat. Yeah. You know, you were putting on pressure, but you weren't adding stress. Mm-hmm. And you were saying, I invite you to make this change with me, as opposed to I impose this change on you. That's a big one.
Yes.
And the other thing about why people resist change is that it hasn't been communicated to them well. Yeah. You know, so I'm someone who, I don't really need to know how we're going to do something. I trust that smart people will work it out, but I like to know why. Yeah. So if someone is bringing me an idea and they're not prepared to tell me why we're doing this, then I will resist change. And I'm meant to be the change guy, you know. Whereas I work with other people who say, look, I don't care why, just I need to understand how.
Yeah.
If people resisting change, it means they haven't seen the value in it. There's not enough information. It hasn't been explained to them in a way that they can get behind it. And they don't see where they fit. That's the other thing. If you've ever given anyone Google Earth, I find it fascinating. You give someone the entire planet. What's the first thing they'll look for?
Well, my answer yesterday was your house or a monument you've never been to, right? But yeah, everybody. And I asked like 3 people last night too. What was the first thing you went to? And they all said the same thing. It was their house.
My house.
Yeah.
So let's take that as a metaphor. You say to someone, behold the big picture, behold the future. We go, I can't see me. Where am I? Can you show me where I am?
Yeah.
And I've said, don't worry, you're in there somewhere. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, robots are coming and we're going to do 4D printing and we're going to have neural chips in our heads.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. You'll be great. And you can see people going, no one's shown me my house.
Yeah.
No one's shown me where I am. And I think it's that sort of, there's that where's Waldo thing. Like you've got to be in all of the bigness. You've got to show someone, and that's you right there. And look at you go. And then people feel more comfortable. They'll breathe because they can see a future with them in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what put me onto this was I was working with a client who designs robots, like it's an automation company. And it was the only client I'd ever heard of who used the word automation with real passion and excitement, because they realized that they were on the side of that wave. To them, it was magnificent. To everyone else, it was terrifying. And the same is true with disruption. I don't know if you've noticed this.
Yeah.
You know, when CEOs love to talk about disruption, it's because they see themselves as a disruptor. But what's hilarious is since the whole pandemic has happened, none of those CEOs are talking about disruption anymore.
No,
because now they're being disrupted.
Yes.
Now they're being disrupted and they don't like it. So it's to do with what side of the wave am I on? Is it happening to me or am I making it happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that changes the discussion a lot.
Well, it does. It does. It's like, are you affecting the wave, affecting with an A, or are you being effected by the wave? And
That's right.
it makes all the difference. Yeah, I
That's
completely
right.
agree.
That's right.
That's first rate, man. All right. So I've got one other question for you, and it has to do with automation. What do you think automation is going to be doing for change in the future?
Do you know, it's really, really interesting, the whole thing with automation, because really we've been automating work for the longest time. You know, if you think about instead of plowing a field by hand, you know, we designed tools and then we got animals. I mean, that's Paleolithic technology, but that was automation. So really, automation is a thing that human beings do because we are labor-saving animals. We're not time-saving animals. We'll waste time on all sorts of stuff, but we do. We do.
We totally do.
We will binge watch anything. So time doesn't seem to matter to us, but we don't like labor. And so I think automation is an inevitable part of the human psychology to, can someone else do that for me? Like if a robot could do it for me, I'd be happy with that, but then that's going to put someone else out of a job. I think since the Industrial Revolution, I think we've been dehumanizing work. So if you go back to the factories, if you go back to the assembly lines and Henry Ford and all the rest of it, you reduce the human being from a craftsperson who made something to really just a unit on an assembly line that did one job over and over again. That's an autonomous, that's a job for a machine, right? And so we've been treating people like machines since the Industrial Revolution, because in those, up until recently, people were cheaper. But the machines are getting smarter and the machines are getting cheaper, right? And if you're a businessman saying, hang on, this thing can work forever, it doesn't complain, it has no ego, it doesn't take sick days off, I think I'm going to get a machine. I can't see automation stopping. I think it's what we've always done. I think it's what we'll always do. The thing that I'm interested in is, are there things that machines are bad at? And would they be things that perhaps people should be doing instead? And what got me started on this was, I don't know if you remember Chesley Sullenberger. You know, he's Sully, right? He's taken off from, I think it was LaGuardia, and he loses both engines to bird strike, and he doesn't have the airspeed, he hasn't got the altitude, he can't get to another airport in time. He turns to the autopilot and says, okay, autopilot, what do I do now? And of course the program just goes, no, I don't know, never seen this one before. It doesn't say, hey, Sully, how about this? Let's land on the Hudson. Machines don't know how to do that.
No.
Machines can only solve problems that have been predicted by humans and programmed into the machines. So if we were living in an environment in which all of our problems were familiar, that everything we're going to face in the news tomorrow is, oh, this again, then fine, what can be solved by a machine? But if our problems are new and unprecedented and historic, I don't know if any of this sounds familiar, be going, yeah, we need people to sort this thing out. And that's why I think creativity, innovation, inventiveness, these are things that machines can't do.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure they could ever do them, because we don't even know how people do it.
Well,
And if you don't know
right.
how people do it, then you can't turn it into code, and then you can't make a machine do it, you know?
Exactly. You were talking about that the other day when about trust. Like machines can't
Oh,
build trust. Like,
no, no, they can't. And every business I know right now is saying we need to be able to create trust with our consumers and you know, with our supporters and suppliers and our staff. There's no algorithm for that,
no.
you know? And here's the other thing. The biggest industry in the next 50 years anywhere in the Western world will be care, the care industry. If you think about it, we have this amazing age quake coming where we are living way too long and not well enough. And so who's going to take care of us? Now, can machines care for people? No, they can't. They can feed us, they could change us, they could bathe us, but they can't actually care about us.
No.
And so, and guess what? Is caring a skill? Do you have to be qualified to care? No, you don't. You just have to have empathy. Oh, that's something else that machines can't have. So when we start looking at what are the things that people need that other people can do well, and they won't be jobs that machines can do. So I guess my thing is about rehumanizing work, to take back the pride and the craftspersonship and the care and the attention and the empathy and compassion and humanity that was part of the workplace. Because we killed it. We've kind of pushed it off during the Industrial Revolution, and now it's back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly, I saw a lot of that fear about automation when I was doing automation training too. So it's a good testament to what I saw too, that, you know, we'd have an owner that would buy an automation piece and we'd go in to do the training on something very simple, drag and drop, shouldn't be all that scary. But there would be such pushback from the folks who were receiving the training because they were afraid their friend was going to lose their job. And we would have to say, hey, look, you know, that train is moving anyway. You can get on it or not. And that's a choice, sure. But you also can look at it like it opens capacity and it allows you to do more of those humanized tasks that are more skilled and that can't be automated easily or well. So,
and actually, that's a really good point. I think what happens is in Western cultures, we are encouraged to think that you are your job. You know, someone says, I am a doctor, I am a policeman, I am a lawyer, I am my job.
Yeah.
I will absolutely guarantee your job will be made obsolete.
Right.
Yeah. Your job will be made obsolete. The thing that you do will be done by a machine. Is that all you are?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think if you can separate, I am not my job is just something I do in exchange for money. I'm sure there are other things that I can do. I will never be made obsolete. My job has already been made obsolete, you know, and if you can separate those two things, it helps you put this thing into a context.
It really does. It really does. Okay. So, any other tips or techniques that you can give our viewers about navigating change projects?
Yeah. Okay, there's a couple. One of my favorites is we don't spend a lot of time thinking about what hasn't changed. So we put a lot of emphasis on, well, you know, we're having to change the currency or change the economy or change the government or whatever. And we focus a great deal on all I'm seeing is change. But if it looks like everything is changing, then you're not paying very close attention. Because if you have a good look around, a lot of things don't change at all. And where I got this thought was, if you've ever been on a boat in really choppy seas or been in a plane during turbulence, what the old sea hands will tell you is pick out something that's not moving and just keep your eyes on it, and then your equilibrium will be fine and you won't throw up. And I think that's the same with change. So if I was to talk about, back in the early 80s, I worked with a company that made slides. Now, most of you won't even know what they are, but before we had PowerPoint, we used to have little chips of film that were in little sandwiches of glass that you put in a projector and you pumped light through to go on a screen. That's why we say, hey, what's the slide? Show me your slides, because the things used to literally slide into a mechanism. It was so primitive.
I remember.
Of course you remember. And you remember it would take forever to make 3 or 4 slides. You know, clients would come in and they'd want 4 slides for a presentation, and it might take us, there'd be 10 of us working on it, and it may take us a couple of days to turn them around. And we were fast. Like, that's how it worked, right? And I remember when we saw the first version of PowerPoint, and my guys are going, this is going to make our job so much easier. And I remember thinking, I think this is going to make our job obsolete. I have a feeling that's the end of this business, right? But
Yeah.
what's really interesting, when I look back at what I did then and what I do now,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything that hasn't changed? Yeah, actually, there's a couple of things that haven't changed. And I've learned to think of it like a little triangle. See how that works. Like at the top of the triangle is, what is the purpose?
Yeah.
So has my role as a communicator changed?
Mm-hmm.
Not much. I mean, why I communicate, why I talk to people, what I talk about. My role
Right.
is still about conveying ideas and connecting ways of people thinking. That's sort of what I used to do in the slide days, and it's sort of what I do now. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I'm just doing more of it now, but that hasn't altered the purpose. The
Right.
point hasn't changed, right? And then I think about, well, what about what about the realities of communication?
Mm-hmm.
Have what our clients want to talk about, or what works and what doesn't work, have they changed? Not really.
Nope.
In fact, they haven't changed at all. The things that people respond to, the messages that work, the ways of communicating, that hasn't changed at all. So the realities of the business haven't changed. Clients
Right.
still want everything at the last minute. There's never enough time. There's never enough money. If you haven't gotten used to that by now, you're not paying attention at all.
Yeah.
So what's left? What's left? The possibilities,
Yeah.
the ways in which we do this, how we deliver, how we think and work. This is new,
Yeah.
but this is the only bit that's new.
The tools are
The
new.
delivery is, the tools are new,
Yeah.
but the purpose of the work is not new, and the realities of what works and what doesn't work, that's not new.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a fourth thing, but of the three things, two of them don't move at all.
Right.
And the other one, I can either choose to be frightened by or excited by,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the other thing too. If you think that people line up to go on roller coasters, well, that means that we choose to be excited or we choose to be scared. The thing
Yes.
itself isn't intrinsically either. It's a choice that we make.
It is. It is. And that's a really good point. I was talking with another friend not too long ago about grief and change. And whenever you're making that change, there's always something that's left behind. So, you know, you can either look at what was left behind and be sad that it's not there anymore, or you can be excited about for all the possibilities of what could be next. So that's
actually
marvelous.
that's really interesting. I think it's happening in Australia. I don't know whether you're seeing the same thing in the States, but I think that most people are waiting for the vaccine. They're waiting for the cure. They're waiting for the restrictions to be lifted because they want to go back. They want to go back to what they had. And so they're sitting there on pause with the other button on reverse. So as soon as we stop pausing, we go back. We just go back to the old way. That's the majority of people, I think, at least in my country. But I would say that there's a small number of people who are saying, oh no, I don't want to go back. I want to go forward.
Right.
When this is over, I want to recapture the things that we've lost since December.
Right.
But I also want to hang on to some of these new things that I'm learning.
Really
these are very cool.
Yeah.
And I want to build my next out of what I've been forced to learn under lockdown and what I learnt in the time before that. I want to take the best of both worlds to make the new version of my business.
Well, and I really hope, I think
that
there's going to be some really great things that come out of it in terms of quality of life for most people. Being able to work from home, not travel as much, do more meetings like this. Fantastic.
In a way, I mean, this is, I mean, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I always feel, I hope this goes long enough that people don't just, that it sticks. Because otherwise what happens is people can accommodate, you know, they can tweak and they can adapt. But I actually want people to embrace flexible hours and flexible working. And if you've got greater respect for healthcare workers, if you've got greater respect for teachers, I'd like that to stick. Like there's a bunch of things, people have become more resourceful. You know, they're learning to waste less material. They're commuting less. They're starting to cook at home. They're spending more time with their families. I'd like to hang on to some of that. My fear is that we'll just go back to the hamster wheel when this is over. And I think it's a shame because there's some beautiful learning happening at the moment if we can hang on to it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Jason, thank you so much. This has been
It's a pleasure.
outstanding. And just the ability to learn from all of your experience with change and your unique entrance into the environment. Oh, just enormous impact. And I really hope that you get your wish and you get to share this vision with the whole world, because there's a lot of people that could benefit from it, that's for sure. So
Well, it's been
thank you.
great talking to you, and I've loved it very much. So thanks for the
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt. Anytime, and we'll do it again, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.